On the morning of her graduation, Leora Benson stood behind the heavy velvet curtain, hands trembling as the murmur of 3,000 guests rose like distant thunder. She had rehearsed her speech for weeks, but her heart behaved like it belonged to someone else, someone young, frightened, and still begging for validation she would never receive. Beyond that curtain sat the two people who swore she would never amount to anything, Malcolm and Corinne Benson, her parents. They weren't here for her. They were here for Zarya, her twin sister, the one they had poured money, attention, and affection into as if love were a finite resource they had to ration. But Leora was no longer the invisible girl in the corner of family photos. Today, she would walk onto that stage not as a shadow but as the Whitford scholar and valedictorian, a reality her parents did not know. And for reasons even she didn't fully understand, she felt no triumph, no revenge, only a quiet, unsettling stillness. As she waited for her cue, she replayed the moment 4 years earlier that had carved her future into something sharp and irreversible. The night her father told her she wasn't worth the investment. She hadn't known then that his words would ignite something dangerous and powerful inside her. But she also hadn't known that her success would unravel secrets within her family. Secrets buried so deeply they should never have surfaced. A stagehand lifted the curtain slightly and whispered, "You're up next." Leora inhaled slowly. Her past wasn't dead. It was sitting in the front row. 4 years earlier, on a humid summer evening in 2021, the Benson living room felt more like a courtroom than a family space. Malcolm Benson sat in his leather recliner, legs crossed, expression firm with the confidence of someone convinced his logic was flawless. Corinne perched on the edge of the couch, fingers laced tightly in her lap as though bracing herself. Zarya, already glowing with the privilege she never had to earn, stood by the window clutching her acceptance letter to prestigious Whitbridge University. Leora sat opposite them, her own acceptance letter to Eastridge State trembling in her hands. "Let's discuss finances," Malcolm began, steepling his fingers. His tone was cold, managerial, like he was preparing to deny a loan. "Zarya's tuition, housing, and expenses will be fully covered." Zarya let out a squeal of delight. Corinne smiled softly, the kind of smile a mother gives to the child she secretly prefers. Then Malcolm turned to Leora, and his expression hardened. "Leora, we've decided we will not be funding your education." The sentence did not land, it detonated. Leora blinked. "I'm sorry. We must invest wisely," Malcolm continued condescendingly. "Zarya has leadership potential. She'll make beneficial connections. Your path is different." He paused, and what he said next would haunt her for years. "You're smart, Leora, but you're not exceptional. There's no return on investment with you." Zarya's phone buzzed, and she laughed, already telling someone the good news. Leora looked at Corinne, silently pleading for fairness, but her mother stared at the carpet. A coward's silence. And in that moment, something inside Leora stopped aching, and began calculating. Leora Benson sat on the edge of her narrow twin bed that night, the dim yellow lamp casting a weak circle of light over her notebook. The rest of the room was silent, still, too still. Down the hall, she could hear Zarya laughing with their mother, the clatter of dishes, and the warm hum of a household she had never truly belonged to. She did not cry. She expected she might, but her eyes were dry, her body steady, and her mind strangely clear. "You're not exceptional," her father had said, the sentence carved into her memory like a blade into wood. "There's no return on investment with you." It echoed again and again, until the words lost their sting and became something else: fuel. She opened her old laptop, its cracked hinge squeaking, and began searching for scholarships. Hundreds of pages loaded slowly, painfully, as if the universe itself questioned her right to dream. She scrolled anyway. Some required recommendation letters she would never get. Others had already closed. But then she saw it, the Kingsbury Whitford Scholars Program. 20 scholars selected nationwide. Full funding. Living stipend. Academic prestige that could rewrite her entire future. The odds were impossible. She bookmarked it anyway. She flipped open her notebook and began calculating, tuition costs, meal plans, the cheapest shared housing near campus, how many hours she could realistically work without collapsing. As she wrote, her pen moved like it belonged to someone else, someone unwavering, someone dangerous. She whispered, "This is the price of freedom," without realizing she had said it aloud. But someone heard. In the hallway, a shadow shifted. Figure paused. A voice, breath-soft, murmured, "Interesting." Leora didn't hear it. But the person who did would use this moment later in ways she could never predict. Her first semester at Eastridge State felt like stepping into a battlefield disguised as a campus. Leora's days began at 4:45 a.m. with the jarring buzz of her thrift store alarm clock. By 5:15, she was behind the counter at Morning Brew Cafe, grinding beans and steaming milk while the campus slept. Nadine Price, her co-worker, watched her silently one morning before saying, "Girl, nobody wakes up this early unless they're running from something." Leora didn't look up. "I'm running toward something," she corrected, though she wasn't entirely sure which version was true. After her shift, she rushed across campus for classes, her backpack heavy with borrowed textbooks and her eyelids heavier still. She took notes with the precision of someone who could not afford to miss anything. Not a concept, not an opportunity, not a single step toward independence. Nights were the worst. While other students laughed from open dorm windows, Leora sat in the corner of the library, surrounded by quiet, buried under assignments and survival. Thanksgiving came like a cruel reminder. She called home hoping, just hoping to feel missed. Her mother answered with cheerful detachment asking, "Are you eating? Are classes all right?" But then Leora heard it, her father's voice in the background. "Tell her I'm busy." The words weren't meant for her to hear. They landed anyway. Minutes later, she opened social media and froze. A photo of her family at the dinner table. 3 plates, 3 chairs. No empty seat. No space for her. Zarya captioned it, "Thankful for my amazing family." Something in Leora hardened that night. The ache didn't vanish, it calcified. And somewhere on campus, someone else noticed her resolve tightening. Someone watching from a distance. Someone who was waiting. It was in Microeconomics 101 that Leora's life shifted without warning. The classroom buzzed with students who feared the subject almost as much as they feared the professor, Dr. Amara Voss. She was known for razor-sharp intelligence, merciless grading, and a silence so heavy it felt like a threat. Leora sat in the third row, scribbling notes, determined to survive the semester even if her sleep-deprived brain trembled around the edges. When the first essay was returned, the room erupted with groans, B-minuses and CS scattered like debris. But on Leora's paper, in sharp, confident red ink, were 2 letters she had never seen before, A+. Beneath them a message. "See me after class." Her stomach tightened. Praise or punishment, she couldn't tell. After class she approached the desk. Dr. Voss didn't look up. "Sit." Leora sat. The professor removed her glasses with deliberate slowness, studying her with unsettling precision. "Where did you attend school before this?" she asked. "Public school," Leora answered. "Nothing advanced." "And your family?" Leora hesitated. Something about Dr. Voss's gaze compelled honesty. "They don't support my education." "At all?" "Why not?" Leora swallowed. "They said I'm not worth the investment." Dr. Voss was silent long enough for Leora to fear she'd said too much. Then the professor leaned forward. "Have you heard of the Whitford Scholarship?" Leora blinked. "Only 20 students in the whole country. Full ride. Living stipend. Career doors you cannot imagine." Dr. Voss's voice dropped to a whisper. "You have potential, Ms. Benson. Extraordinary potential. But potential means nothing if unseen." Her eyes sharpened. "Let me make you seen." In that moment, Leora felt the ground shift beneath her. But she did not yet understand that Dr. Voss had her own reasons. From that day forward, Leora's life moved like a storm she couldn't control. She earned a 4.0 GPA semester after semester, fueled by fierce discipline and desperation. She worked 3 jobs without complaint, cafe worker, library assistant, and eventually tutor for the economics department. She rarely slept more than 4 hours. She rarely spoke unless necessary. But slowly, she began noticing things that unsettled her. Professors she hadn't met knew her name. Opportunities appeared without explanation. Private workshops, advanced seminars, leadership invitations. Emails arrived addressed to outstanding candidate Benson, though she had never applied for half of them. She shrugged it off as luck. She didn't have time for speculation. Not when survival required motion. But others noticed. Nadine would squint at her between cappuccinos. "I'm telling you," she whispered. "Someone's pushing you forward." "Nobody is," Leora insisted. But the truth gnawed at her. On a freezing January morning, she collapsed behind the cafe counter. Nadine barely caught her before her head hit the tile. The doctor diagnosed dehydration and exhaustion. Dr. Voss visited her the next day. Her expression unreadable. "You push yourself like someone being chased," she murmured. Leora didn't know how to explain that she was being chased. Not by a person but by failure. By the echo of her father's voice. By the fear of becoming invisible again. And yet, there were moments when Leora felt something else. Presence. Footsteps behind her in quiet hallways. Conversations that seemed to stop when she entered a room. Someone watching her. Someone studying her. She told herself it was just stress. But deep down she knew better. Ambition had a shadow. And she had stepped directly into it. Late in the spring semester, Dr. Amara Voss called Leora into her office. A windowless room lined with shelves of academic journals and plaques. The fluorescent lighting hummed faintly overhead, casting sharp shadows against the walls. When Leora stepped inside, Dr. Voss closed the door behind her with a quiet, definitive click. "Sit," she said, her tone crisp. Leora obeyed. The professor folded her arms and examined her, eyes narrowed with clinical precision. "I've decided to nominate you for the Kingsbury Whitford Scholarship." Leora froze. Her breath caught. "Me?" "Yes," Dr. Voss replied. "Though your life has been defined by lack, your mind is defined by abundance. The committee will see that, if you don't sabotage yourself." Leora swallowed hard. "What do I need to do?" 10 essays, Dr. Voss said. 3 rounds of interviews. And complete honesty. They will scrutinize every part of your life." He paused. "Are you ready for that?" Leora hesitated. She had spent years building emotional armor just to survive. Now she would be asked to take it off and hand it to strangers. "I'm ready," she whispered, though the truth trembled behind the words. Dr. Voss nodded slowly. "Good." She slid a thick packet across the desk. "This will be the hardest work you've ever done." Leora left the office with the packet pressed to her chest like a fragile weapon. That night she opened the first page, and felt something unsettling coil inside her. The application questions asked about hardship, resilience, and origin. But beneath them she sensed another layer. Almost as if the scholarship committee wanted to know what she hadn't admitted even to herself. As she wrote, memories she had buried began forcing their way to the surface. And she had no idea someone else would soon be reading her words long before the committee did. The essays consumed 3 months of Leora's life. She wrote in the library until her hands cramped, rewrote until her fingertips tingled, and deleted entire paragraphs when her own truth frightened her. She wrote about exclusion, about working 3 jobs, about the quiet violence of being overlooked by the people meant to love her. But in the process, she confessed things she had never allowed herself to think, let alone write. Anger, shame, the echo of one sentence her father had thrown at her like a curse. "You are not exceptional." Jesse felt like peeling away skin. Nadine noticed. "You look haunted," she said one night as they wiped down cafe tables. Leora forced a smile. "Scholarship deadlines." Nadine gave her a long, searching look. "Just don't lose yourself trying to prove you're worth something." The words struck harder than intended. Leora didn't answer. When she finally submitted the packet, she felt both relief and dread. She did not know that someone, Someone with access they should not have had, opened her essays before the committee ever saw them. That person read every word. Read her pain. Read the things she had survived quietly for years. And instead of compassion, they felt something else. Opportunity. 2 weeks later, Leora received the email that would change everything. She was a finalist, one of 50 nationwide. The final interview would be in New York. She stared at the ticket prices and felt her stomach twist. Too expensive. Impossible. Her bank account blinked $612. Rent was due in 2 weeks. "You're going," Renee Calder declared after Leora told her. "I can't afford it," Leora whispered. "I didn't ask if you could afford it," Renee replied. "I said you're going." And so, on a cold Thursday night, Leora boarded an overnight bus to Manhattan, unaware that someone else had taken the same bus, watching her from 6 rows back. The New York interview was held in a towering glass building that gleamed like a monument to ambition. Leora walked into the lobby with her thrift store blazer, scuffed shoes, and an expression she hoped resembled confidence. The other finalists stood in small clusters, designer suits, polished shoes, parents hovering with encouraging whispers. Leora stood alone. A receptionist offered coffee, but her hands trembled too badly to accept. When her name was called, she walked into a long conference room where 5 judges sat behind a sleek table. They examined her like an artifact. "Ms. Benson," one said, "tell us why you deserve this scholarship." Leora inhaled. "Because I've lived my entire life being told I don't." Pen stopped. Brows lifted. She continued. "I've worked 3 jobs, slept 4 hours a night, and built everything without support. If you choose me, it won't be charity. It will be an investment in someone who refuses to waste it." Another judge leaned forward. "And if you don't get the scholarship?" Leora didn't flinch. "Then I'll still succeed. Just slower." The judges exchanged glances. Impressed, calculating. But then came the question that nearly unmade her. "Who do you owe your success to?" The answer rose instinctively. "Myself." One judge smiled faintly, the first sign of approval. Another scribbled something quickly, but Leora caught a subtle change in the room's energy. Curiosity sharpened into intrigue. The interview ended. She walked out trembling, barely noticing the figure watching her from the far corner of the lobby. Someone she vaguely recognized but could not place. Someone whose interest wasn't admiration. It was hunger. Leora left the building with her heartbeat thudding, unaware that her answer had just become a weapon waiting to be used. 2 weeks later, on her way to morning shift, Leora received the email. She stopped dead in the middle of the sidewalk, the cold biting her cheeks. "Congratulations, Ms. Benson. You have been selected as a Whitford Scholar." Tears spilled instantly, ugly breathless sobs that made a passing cyclist shout, "Move!" But she couldn't move. Not yet. Years of exhaustion crashed over her in a single wave of relief. That night Dr. Voss called her. "Pack your bags," she said. "Whitford Scholars may transfer to any partner institution. Whitbridge would be ideal." Leora froze. "Whitbridge, as in Zarya's school?" "It has the stronger program," Dr. Voss replied. But her tone carried something else. Anticipation. Calculation. "You would also graduate as valedictorian." Leora's pulse stilled. "Valedictorian?" "Yes," Dr. Voss said. "Your grades, leadership, and scholarship status qualify you." Leora didn't know whether to panic or celebrate. The chance to transfer to Whitbridge was a dream, but also a trap filled with ghosts she wasn't ready to face. Still, she whispered, "Okay, I'll do it." That night, as she filled out the transfer paperwork, she felt the presence again, like someone was observing her from just beyond her vision. Faint shift of air. A soft clicking noise near her door. She whipped around. Nothing. Just shadows. But her instincts whispered otherwise. She brushed it off as paranoia, unaware that her acceptance into the scholarship wasn't the only thing triggered. Someone had been waiting for this exact moment. Someone who wanted to expose the Benson family, one secret at a time. Leora arrived at Whitbridge quietly, suitcase in hand, shoulders squared but stomach churning. The campus was breathtaking. Ancient stone buildings, ivy crawling like veins across Gothic walls. Students moved with the confidence of people who had always known doors would open for them. She was the outsider. Again. On her second day, she entered the grand library and froze. Zarya Benson stood by a study table, crisp latte in hand, laughing with friends. When she turned and saw Leora, her laughter died mid-air. "Leora!" Zarya whispered, eyes wide as if seeing a ghost. "What are you doing here?" Leora closed her textbook calmly. "I transferred. Transferred. But Mom and Dad didn't say." "They don't know," Leora replied. Zarya blinked. "Why not?" Leora met her gaze, voice steady. "They never asked." The answer sliced through the air. Zarya stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Do you hate us?" Leora didn't hesitate. "You can't hate people you stopped caring about." Zarya flinched, stunned by the honesty. Leora gathered her books and walked away, her heart pounding, not with regret but with liberation. That night her phone rang 15 times. Malcolm. Corinne. Zarya again. She silenced them all. But as she prepared for bed, her phone buzzed one more time. An unknown number. A text appeared. "Congratulations, scholar. Your family won't survive what comes next." Leora froze, staring at the message, her breath caught in her throat. Who sent it? A threat? A warning? She typed back. "Who is this?" No response. She locked her door, heart hammering. She had wanted a new beginning. Instead, she had stepped into a conspiracy she never saw coming. The next morning, her father finally reached her. The moment she answered, Malcolm Benson's voice boomed through the phone, tense and disbelieving. "Leora, what is this nonsense? Zarya says she saw you at Whitbridge." Leora took a slow breath. "It's not nonsense. I transferred." "Without telling us," he demanded. "Why would you?" "Because you told me I wasn't worth investing in," she said evenly. Silence. A long, heavy silence. Then Malcolm grumbled. "I don't recall saying." "I do." She waited, letting the truth hang. "Dad, I didn't tell you because you didn't care." Corinne's voice appeared faintly in the background. "Leora, sweetheart." "Don't," Leora said, her tone colder than she expected. "Not sweetheart. Not when you left an empty chair at Thanksgiving." Corinne inhaled sharply. Malcolm's tone shifted. Less anger. More fear. "When did you get this scholarship? How did you?" "It doesn't matter how," Leora cut in. "It matters that I did." Malcolm whispered. "We should talk. In person. At graduation." "Fine," Leora replied. "You'll see me there." She hung up. Her hands were shaking, but her spine felt steel straight. Her entire life she had been forced to prove her worth. Now she had. But the victory tasted strange. Bitter. Unsettling. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. "They'll regret what they did. Let me help you." Leora's pulse spiked. Help her do what? Destroy them. Expose them. She typed again. "Who are you?" 3 dots appeared. Then vanished. No reply. Leora's breath trembled. Whether friend or enemy, this person knew too much. And they weren't done. The weeks leading up to graduation unfolded with eerie quiet. Too quiet. Leora balanced valedictorian rehearsals, scholarship meetings and final exams, but beneath the surface of her achievements lay a constant thread of dread. She felt watched. Not in the metaphorical sense, but literally. When she walked across the quad, she would sometimes hear footsteps that stopped when she turned around. When she studied in the library's third-floor alcoves, she sensed eyes tracking her movement. Once, she left her dorm room for 5 minutes and returned to find her desk chair slightly shifted. She told herself it was stress. But stress didn't explain the anonymous messages that arrived every few days. "You deserve justice. They broke you. Let me break them. Graduation will reveal everything." Leora tried to push the messages aside, focusing instead on her speech. She wrote and rewrote the words she wished someone had spoken to her years ago, words about resilience, independence, survival. But the deeper she went into her story, the more she realized something unsettling. Her parents weren't just negligent. They were hiding something. Zarya's nervous behavior, Corinne's sudden emotional fragility, Malcolm's uncharacteristic silence. Something was cracking inside the Benson household, and Leora's success was splitting it open. One evening Zarya called her, hesitant, whispering, "Leora, something's wrong with Dad. He's been different." "Different how?" "Secretive," Zarya said. "He keeps going into the basement and locking the door," Mom said. The call abruptly cut off. A text followed. "Forget what I said. Please don't ask questions." Leora stared at the screen. Something was deeply wrong, and someone wanted her to know. Graduation morning arrived like a storm disguised as sunlight. The sky was clear, the stadium decorated with banners, chairs neatly arranged for the 3,000 guests. Leora dressed carefully, smoothing the valedictorian sash over her gown, the Whitford medallion warm against her skin. Renee helped braid her hair, watching her with quiet pride. "You ready?" Renee asked. Leora exhaled shakily. "I think so." "Good," Renee said. "Because you're about to set that stage on fire." When Leora arrived backstage, her heart clenched. In the front row of the stadium sat Malcolm and Corinne Benson. Perfect posture, perfect outfits, perfectly unaware of what was coming. Zarya sat between them, chewing her lip, her eyes flickering anxiously across the crowd. The university president stepped up to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, "welcome to the Whitbridge University Class of 2025 commencement ceremony." Applause echoed through the stadium. Leora kept her gaze down, gripping her speech, but her pulse pounded violently. Then her phone buzzed. A new message from the unknown number. "Today is the day." Another followed instantly. "Watch your father." Her blood ran cold. She glanced at Malcolm. He wasn't watching the stage. He wasn't smiling. He was staring at her, unblinking, as if he knew something she didn't. The president continued the ceremony. Introductions, awards, honors. Then he returned to the microphone and announced, "And now, it is my great honor to introduce our valedictorian and Whitford scholar, Ms. Leora Benson." A wave of gasps went through the audience. Malcolm's eyes widened. Corinne's bouquet slid from her lap. Zarya covered her mouth in shock. Leora stood, unaware that her speech would not only expose her story, but detonate a truth her parents had spent decades burying. As she stepped into the sunlight, applause thundered across the stadium, except from the front row, where her family sat frozen like statues carved from regret. Leora reached the podium and adjusted the microphone. Her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "Good morning," she began. 4 years ago, someone told me I wasn't worth the investment." Malcolm flinched visibly. Leora continued. "I was told I lacked potential. That my future wasn't worth supporting." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Zarya stared down at her lap. Corinne covered her trembling mouth. "But I stand here today," Leora said, "as proof that their words were not truth, only limitation." The audience leaned closer. A bird landed on the stadium railing, as if even nature wanted to listen. Leora spoke about working 3 jobs, sleeping 4 hours a night, the night she felt invisible, the morning she forced herself to rise anyway. She did not name her parents. She did not need to. "To anyone who has ever been overlooked," she said, "you don't need permission to rise." The stadium erupted into applause. But through it all, Malcolm's expression remained unreadable, until he suddenly stood. People in the crowd turned toward him. Corinne grabbed his wrist. "Malcolm, sit," she whispered desperately. He didn't. He stared at Leora with something between dread and fury. Then he whispered a sentence that only Zarya heard. "It's happening." Zarya's face drained of color. "Dad, please don't." But he sat, quiet, shaking. Leora stepped down from the podium, unaware she had just triggered the collapse of her family's carefully constructed facade. Unaware that her speech had awakened the very secret the anonymous messages had warned her about. Unaware that someone in the audience was recording everything. Not for the memories, but for the evidence. After the ceremony moved on, Leora stepped backstage, her pulse still trembling from adrenaline and the strange intensity in her father's eyes. Renee rushed to hug her. "You killed it. They're still clapping out there." But Leora couldn't shake the unease twisting through her gut. She peeked through the curtain. Malcolm was no longer looking proud or ashamed. He looked terrified. Corinne whispered urgently to him, clutching his arm. Zarya kept glancing around the crowd, as if expecting something or someone to appear. Suddenly, a man in a dark suit rose from the fourth row, lifting a phone. He turned it toward Malcolm, zooming in deliberately. Malcolm stiffened. "Renee," Leora whispered. "Do you know who that is?" Renee followed her gaze. "No. But he's recording your family, not you." The man lowered the phone, typed something quickly, and then slipped through the aisle and out of the stadium. Leora's phone buzzed again. The truth always comes out. Follow him. Her heart lurched. She stepped away from Renee and hurried through the building, pushing open a side door. On the far end of the courtyard, she spotted the man in the suit climbing into a black sedan. She jogged closer, too far to stop him but close enough to see the license plate. The car sped away. Leora stood there, chest heaving, realizing the truth. Someone wasn't trying to destroy her family. Someone believed her father had already destroyed something, and they wanted Leora to see it. When she returned to the stadium, Malcolm was gone. Corinne and Zarya rushed toward her, panicked. "Your father left," Corinne said, shaking. "He said he had to fix something before it was too late." "Too late for what?" Leora demanded. But Corinne only paled, whispering. "He promised this day would never come." Graduation morning arrived like a storm disguised as sunlight. The sky was clear, the stadium decorated with banners, chairs neatly arranged for the 3,000 guests. Leora dressed carefully, smoothing the valedictorian sash over her gown, the Whitford medallion warm against her skin. Renee helped braid her hair, watching her with quiet pride. "You ready?" Renee asked. Leora exhaled shakily. "I think so." "Good," Renee said. "Because you're about to set that stage on fire." When Leora arrived backstage, her heart clenched. In the front row of the stadium sat Malcolm and Corinne Benson. Perfect posture, perfect outfits, perfectly unaware of what was coming. Zarya sat between them, chewing her lip, her eyes flickering anxiously across the crowd. The university president stepped up to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, "welcome to the Whitbridge University class of 2025 commencement ceremony." Applause echoed through the stadium. Leora kept her gaze down, gripping her speech, but her pulse pounded violently. Then her phone buzzed. A new message from the unknown number. "Today is the day." Another followed instantly. "Watch your father." Her blood ran cold. She glanced at Malcolm. He wasn't watching the stage. He wasn't smiling. He was staring at her, unblinking, as if he knew something she didn't. The president continued the ceremony. Introductions, awards, honors. Then he returned to the microphone and announced, "And now, it is my great honor to introduce our valedictorian and Whitford scholar, Ms. Leora Benson." A wave of gasps went through the audience. Malcolm's eyes widened. Corinne's bouquet slid from her lap. Zarya covered her mouth in shock. Leora stood, unaware that her speech would not only expose her story, but detonate a truth her parents had spent decades burying. As she stepped into the sunlight, applause thundered across the stadium, except from the front row, where her family sat frozen like statues carved from regret. Leora reached the podium and adjusted the microphone. Her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "Good morning," she began. 4 years ago, someone told me I wasn't worth the investment. Malcolm flinched visibly. Leora continued. I was told I lacked potential. That my future wasn't worth supporting. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Zarya stared down at her lap. Corinne covered her trembling mouth. But I stand here today, Leora said, as proof that their words were not truth, only limitation. The audience leaned closer. A bird landed on the stadium railing, as if even nature wanted to listen. Leora spoke about working 3 jobs, sleeping 4 hours a night, the night she felt invisible, the morning she forced herself to rise anyway. She did not name her parents. She did not need to. To anyone who has ever been overlooked, she said, you don't need permission to rise. The stadium erupted into applause. But through it all, Malcolm's expression remained unreadable, until he suddenly stood. People in the crowd turned toward him. Corinne grabbed his wrist. Malcolm, sit, she whispered desperately. He didn't. He stared at Leora with something between dread and fury. Then he whispered a sentence that only Zarya heard. It's happening. Zarya's face drained of color. Dad, please don't. But he sat, quiet, shaking. Leora stepped down from the podium, unaware she had just triggered the collapse of her family's carefully constructed facade. Unaware that her speech had awakened the very secret the anonymous messages had warned her about. Unaware that someone in the audience was recording everything. Not for the memories, but for the evidence. After the ceremony moved on, Leora stepped backstage. Her pulse still trembling from adrenaline and the strange intensity in her father's eyes. Renee rushed to hug her. You killed it. They're still clapping out there. But Leora couldn't shake the unease twisting through her gut. She peeked through the curtain. Malcolm was no longer looking proud or ashamed. He looked terrified. Corinne whispered urgently to him, clutching his arm. Zarya kept glancing around the crowd, as if expecting something or someone to appear. Suddenly, a man in a dark suit rose from the 4th row, lifting a phone. He turned it toward Malcolm, zooming in deliberately. Malcolm stiffened. Renee, Leora whispered. Do you know who that is? Renee followed her gaze. No. But he's recording your family, not you. The man lowered the phone, typed something quickly, and then slipped through the aisle and out of the stadium. Leora's phone buzzed again. The truth always comes out. Follow him. Her heart lurched. She stepped away from Renee and hurried through the building, pushing open a side door. On the far end of the courtyard, she spotted the man in the suit climbing into a black sedan. She jogged closer, too far to stop him but close enough to see the license plate. The car sped away. Leora stood there, chest heaving, realizing the truth. Someone wasn't trying to destroy her family. Someone believed her father had already destroyed something, and they wanted Leora to see it. When she returned to the stadium, Malcolm was gone. Corinne and Zarya rushed toward her, panicked. Your father left, Corinne said, shaking. He said he had to fix something before it was too late. Too late for what? Leora demanded. But Corinne only paled, whispering. He promised this day would never come. Corinne led Leora and Zarya to a quiet corner of the reception hall. Her hands trembled so violently that her purse slipped from her lap twice. Zarya kept glancing at the doors, terrified their father might return, or worse, that he wouldn't. Mom, Leora said sharply. What is going on? Corinne closed her eyes. Your father, he wasn't always like this. Before you and Zarya were born, he made a mistake. A terrible one. Leora felt her breath hitch. What kind of mistake? Corinne swallowed. He was the financial officer at a non-profit. And he was accused of mismanaging funds. Accused? Leora echoed. Or guilty? Corinne looked away. That was answer enough. He paid back everything he could, Corinne whispered. But not enough. The board forced him out quietly. We moved states to start over. He hid it from everyone, including both of you. Leora stared at her mother, shock threading into anger. What does that have to do with today? Zarya whispered. Corinne's voice shook. The non-profit was funded by the Kingsbury Whitford Foundation. Leora's stomach dropped. The same foundation funding her scholarship. The same foundation whose founder was sitting in the VIP section today. The board discovered the missing funds again last month, Corinne continued. They reopened the investigation. And when they found out you were a Whitford scholar. She broke off, covering her face. Your father panicked. He said your success would pull everything back into the light. Leora felt the room tilt. The text, the warnings, the man with the camera. It wasn't about her. It was about Malcolm. He thought today would expose him, Corinne whispered. But I think someone else wanted that too. When she finally lifted her head, tears streaked down her cheeks. Leora. The past your father buried is about to explode. And we can't stop it. Leora stepped outside, needing air, needing distance from the crushing revelation. Her father's betrayal wasn't just personal. It was institutional, ethical, and criminal. And somehow, her scholarship had become the fuse that reignited everything. She leaned against a stone pillar, breathing hard. Footsteps approached. You okay? A voice asked. Leora turned. It was Henry Kingsbury, founder of the scholarship. He looked older up close, lines of exhaustion etched into the corners of his eyes. But his gaze was steady, almost sympathetic. Your speech was extraordinary, he said gently. And long overdue. You don't know me, Leora replied, trying to keep her voice controlled. Kingsbury sighed. Actually, I do. Leora stiffened. What do you mean? Your father worked for one of my organizations, he said. Years ago. Before you were born. The final pieces locked into place. So you knew who I was when I applied, she whispered. Kingsbury's expression softened. Your name came across my desk. First I thought it was a coincidence. But your essays, your drive, your resilience, you deserved that scholarship. I made sure no one punished you for your father's actions. Leora felt the ground tilt beneath her. Someone threatened me, she said. Someone recorded my father today. Kingsbury's eyes hardened. I know. And they're not after you. They're after him. He stepped closer. But listen to me carefully. You earned your success. Nothing your father did can erase that. What happens now? Leora whispered. Kingsbury sighed. There will be consequences. Investigations. Headlines. Leora closed her eyes. The future she fought for suddenly felt heavy, burdened with a scandal she never asked for. Kingsbury placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. But you are not him. Remember that. She nodded, tears burning. But as Kingsbury walked away, Leora felt someone else watching her again. The anonymous messenger. Still following. Still waiting. That evening, as sunset washed the campus in gold, Leora sat on a bench near the fountain, letting the noise of the celebration fade behind her. Everything was happening too fast, the scholarship, the secret, the messages, and the man in the suit. She opened her phone again. No new text. Part of her wanted answers. Part of her feared them. Footsteps approached quietly. She tensed, until she heard Zarya's voice. Leora. Leora looked up. Zarya sank beside her, shoulders slumped. I didn't know, she whispered. About Dad. About any of it. I know, Leora said softly. For the first time in years, they felt like sisters, stripped of rivalry and expectation. I should have asked how you were doing, Zarya murmured. I should have cared more. We were raised to believe caring was optional, Leora replied. Like love was something you earned. Zarya wiped her eyes. What happens now? With Dad? Leora exhaled. There will be consequences. Zarya nodded, looking small, fragile. I don't hate you, she whispered. I never did. Leora felt something loosen in her chest. I don't hate you either. They sat in silence. Then Leora's phone buzzed. She stiffened. The anonymous number. Your father is at the old non-profit. If you want the truth, go. A location pin followed. Zarya read over her shoulder. We're not going there. This is dangerous. Leora hesitated. But she needed closure. She needed answers that weren't filtered through secrecy and shame. I'm going, she said quietly. Then I'm coming with you, Zarya replied. The two sisters stood united for once, not by shared upbringing but by shared uncertainty. They didn't know what waited in that building. But they went anyway. The non-profit headquarters was an abandoned brick building on the edge of town, its windows boarded, and paint peeling like sunburned skin. The air smelled of dust and disuse. Leora and Zarya stepped inside cautiously, their footsteps echoing. Dad! Zarya called. Dad, please. A faint noise answered, a mutter, a choked sound, coming from deeper within the building. They followed the sound to a half-lit storage room. Malcolm Benson stood alone, hunched over a metal desk littered with boxes of old financial records. He looked older than they had ever seen him, defeated, hollow. Leora. Zarya, he whispered. You shouldn't be here. You lied to us, Leora said quietly. Malcolm closed his eyes. I lied to everyone. Zarya stepped forward. Dad, please, just tell us the truth. Malcolm sank onto a metal chair. I didn't steal everything they accused me of. But I didn't stop the person who did. Leora's breath caught. Who? Malcolm's hand shook. Your uncle. Corinne's brother. He was the one in charge of the accounts. Leora froze. You protected him. Malcolm nodded slowly. If I exposed him, our family would have fallen apart. So I took the blame. I thought it would end there. He looked at Leora with haunted eyes. But when your name appeared on the Whitford finalist list, I knew they'd reopen everything. They'd dig. They'd expose us. They'd expose you. Expose me. Leora whispered. Why me? Malcolm's voice cracked. Because they think you knew. Leora recoiled. Knew. Dad, I was a child. Malcolm covered his face. It doesn't matter. Someone wants vengeance. And they're using you to get it. Before Leora could respond, a voice from the doorway said, Correct. They spun around. The man in the suit stepped into the room. He moved with unsettling calm, closing the door behind him. His expression was unreadable, emotionless yet electric with intent. Who are you? Leora demanded. The man adjusted his sleeve. My name isn't important. What matters is the truth. Malcolm stood weakly. You've been harassing my daughter. No, the man replied. I've been warning her. He turned to Leora. Your father isn't the villain. He's the accomplice. Zarya's voice quivered. Accomplice to what? The man opened a worn leather folder and tossed it onto the desk. Papers spilled out. Bank statements, signatures, transaction logs. Leora scanned them, heart racing. They weren't from Malcolm at all. They were from someone else. These signatures, she whispered. They're from Uncle Darius. The man nodded. He stole nearly $300,000. Your father discovered it. Instead of reporting him, he allowed the foundation to believe he was at fault. He covered for your uncle. But your uncle vanished. And the money vanished with him. Leora looked up, overwhelmed. Why tell me this now? The man stepped closer. Because your father's silence cost dozens of families their funding. Programs closed. Scholarships evaporated. His gaze hardened. Including mine. Zarya gasped. Leora felt the breath leave her body. Your scholarship was denied. The man's voice cracked, not with rage but grief. It was the only chance I had. When the foundation collapsed from the scandal, my future died with it. He looked directly at Malcolm. You protected a thief. And children suffered for it. Malcolm lowered his head, shame swallowing him whole. Leora whispered. So the messages, the recordings. All of it was you? Yes, he said. But not to destroy you. To make you see the truth your family hid. You deserved the scholarship. But you deserved the truth too. Months later, Leora moved into her small Manhattan studio, a place so tiny she could touch her bed and her closet at the same time. She loved it. It was hers, built with her own effort, funded by her own job at a consulting firm that hired her straight out of graduation. Kingsbury sent a handwritten letter welcoming her into the Foundation's mentorship circle. Dr. Voss emailed only once. I knew you would rise. Now rise further. Zarya visited often. Their relationship healed slowly, awkwardly but honestly. I'm trying, Zarya would say. And she was. Corinne wrote long apologies, pages and pages. Leora responded to some, saved others for later. Forgiveness, she learned, wasn't an act. It was a process. One evening, Leora donated her first $10,000 to a scholarship fund for students without parental support. For someone who needs a chance, she wrote anonymously. Renee cried when she heard. Frankly, she said, hugging her, you're a legend. But Leora didn't feel like a legend. She felt like a survivor turning herself into something stronger. She still thought of Malcolm sometimes. He wrote one letter from the correctional facility. A letter filled with sorrow, apologies, and acceptance. Leora didn't respond. Not because she hated him, but because healing meant creating boundaries even truth couldn't break. She kept moving forward step by step, choosing the life she built over the life she was denied. And every day, the weight of her past grew lighter. One night, as Leora stood on her tiny balcony overlooking the hum of the city, she let the warm breeze touch her face. The skyline glittered, indifferent, endless, and full of possibility. She thought of the girl she used to be. The one who sat in a bedroom with a cracked laptop, calculating how to escape the life she was told she didn't deserve. She had escaped. She had risen. But more importantly, she had healed herself. Renee stepped onto the balcony. What are you thinking about? Leora smiled softly. Everything I survived. Renee nudged her shoulder. And everything you'll do next. In the distance, sirens echoed softly. Lights flickered in nearby apartments. Life continued. Messy, unpredictable, beautiful. Leora inhaled deeply. You know, she said quietly, for a long time I believed worth was something someone else had to give me. Parent. A scholarship committee. Anybody. She turned to Renee. But worth is something you decide. And then you defend it. Renee grinned. So what now, Whitford scholar? Leora looked out over the city, her city, and felt a certainty settle in her bones. Now, she said. I build the future I deserved all along. She closed her eyes, letting the peace sink in, letting the past release its final grip. She didn't know whether she would ever fully forgive her parents. She didn't know whether justice would heal the wounds her father had created. But she did know this. She was enough. She had always been enough. And she was finally living like it. The breeze swept gently across her face, carrying away the last remnants of a life where she was unseen. Leora Benson opened her eyes and stepped into her future. A future that belonged to her, and her alone.